Episode 281. I was going to say 286, but that's not true. Here we are. There's nothing to talk about. That's the show. See you later. That's not necessarily true. We've got some rumors. We've got some Overwatch World Cup news. We've got people retiring. But it is a slow news week. But yeah, here we are. Your lovable hosts. It's me. It's Volamel. It's Yiska. How are you?
Doing things, I guess. Like I came in with a lot of enthusiasm that was, of course, immediately shut down by what had.
Why shut down?
As in, like, you know, like I was like, I'm going to really prep this week, and I'm going to have some takes on things because that's what people watch for, and then there are no things to have takes for. So, like, I've unregulated rage that I wanted to, project onto something, but there was really nothing.
That's okay. Depending on how long this takes, I'm sure we can find something for you to direct your rage at, be it a hand drill or, other things. Eric's on the sticks. Eric, how are you?
Doing great, Joe. How are you?
Good. We don't get to hear a lot from Eric, so I figured today, why not? Why not bring in Eric? Lovable.
True. Yeah, I'll definitely, like, there's some stuff that happened in comp, and I think, like, Eric probably, like, 3x's, 4x's our combined playtime, like, overall in Overwatch. So I suppose,
without a doubt.
Like, there was in the one blog post, there was a post in there, and, like, it read, like, specifically, we did not expect that players would pursue all hero titles during the event. That was for the what's it called, the Olympus event, and I was like, oh yeah, that's subtweeting Eric. Like,
I thought about it. It was a consideration.
There's always that completionist crowd that, like, wants to make sure that they collect all, like, the collectibles at the limited time events, and yeah, I mean, I get it. I think it's kind of surprising that they would think that maybe it's like a percentage or like a fraction thing where it's just like, oh, there's a lot of people who, like, really wanted to cash in on this. So,
Eric,
it's possible.
What level of the battle pass are you right now?
Over 200. I've stopped playing.
See
already.
Yeah, and we're not even like into the double XP stuff.
Yeah, that is bonkers. I got Ramatra and I was like, all right,
yeah,
I got my goal. My mission is complete.
I don't think I'll get the mythic skin, especially considering how Tarkov builds are currently right now.
True. The Discord community has joined Escape from Tarkov. We are actively trying to escape. More often than not, we do not. I'll leave it up to your imagination on what we do instead. But you know who did escape? Our Patreon producers, because they support us every show and they make this show possible. So we want to give a special thank you to our Patreon producers: Avril, Vista, Bebe, Battle Crab, Refund Bean, Bronze Babu, Hal, Picasso, Chris R34444, Kasha67, Lotion, Porkchop, Sammy, Rexane, and our YouTube members: I am DRW, Brother Adam L, Sagi Fumi, Ice Am Jello, Fire Element 6, aka Chris R. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And yes, we have been playing Escape from Tarkov, and it's been a good time. I'm gonna have to tweet out a Discord link for the people out there. But yes, continue. Sure. What do you want?
Can I address another crowd of folks that have been supporting the podcast lately?
Sure.
This is coming out of left field, Joe. I didn't even tell you about this.
Okay.
Our parents. Like,
let's go out, parents. Let's go, Punk's dad.
Like, I mean, Punk's dad. Like, of course, that's the one that you saw. But, like, very, like, frequently, I'll just get, like, some nice DMs of, like, some parents, and I won't talk about who are just like, thank you for talking very nicely about my son, and then. Like this, it's nice to see that folks are staying up to date on their kids' like career progression and what folks think about them, and that our opinion is considered in that regard. So I think I've always thought that the share of like insiders and like like involved folks and also players watching TCP is pretty high. So I'm perfectly happy being the This. Are you ready for the most?
Oh, are you gonna toot your own horn?
No,
are you tooting our
it's the
horn?
worst. It's the worst
Yeah, you
comparison.
are.
But it's like we're your favorite industry insiders' favorite podcast, and I won't make any more connections than that because if I tell you the artists, it's almost certainly tooting our own horn too highly.
Yeah, we have a tiny. I don't even like calling it a platform, but we do try our best. And then yeah, if you're actually getting like parents DMing you, I think that's super cool. And I think we have like a weird is a strong word, but we have like a dense amount of parents who are super involved in their children's interests and in what they're pursuing. And I think it's super cool. And I think esports in general is opening up to that. And I think it's dope that, people like Punk's dad, and I remember like Zachary's mom being like super involved and like active on Twitter, and like all these people like showering and like trying to like be the cheerleaders that, I think these people need. Like these pros are, they don't I think they get a lot of love, but in equal sense they get a lot of like vitriol that I think you need some people in your corner. So hats off to you. You're doing a great job. I think you guys are doing awesome things. But who's not doing awesome things? At least not anymore. It's me. I'm not high on Molly because Molly retired. Yiska, I'm sad.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean that was a great career, right? Like it's not a career that
definitely.
Like I think that our part of the community talked about enough. I think it's also just because people don't watch APAC as much. But that was a high quality player, right? Like basically like had incredibly high peaks. Definitely had a career that was, I forget, was he? He was part of the Shanghai roster, right? In season 4?
In 2020, yes, was like the Bebe of
2020.
2020. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Going into 2021.
Is he an all-season champion? Is what I'm asking. I'm forgetting the timelines.
Yes. 2021.
Right. So, I guess, yeah, I don't know. Like now is as good a time as any, especially like considering the situation with the game in China. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this is bittersweet. Definitely like and a career that, at least from our part of the internet, is probably underrated in what he was able to achieve.
I think underrated is, just by like textbook definition, probably very accurate. I don't think we really got to see. I think we saw some glimpses on Chengdu in 2020 of like what Molly could kind of do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it takes somebody either who was partaking in consuming like Contenders China content and maybe some, adept viewers who were trying to get into like gauntlet prep, because I don't think people really got how good Molly was and why. Like I think Kenobi would probably tend to agree with this. Like I went to bat for Molly even against like his view of things at the time. Like I thought Molly was super, super solid. Had like this really odd hero pool because back, I think it was during 2018, maybe late 2019, he also showcased like a weirdly good tracer for somebody who, from a position that typically doesn't play it, in a region that has always been very experimental, I think across esports in general. But this was kind of coming out like in the early stages of like people trying to tinker with goats counters, if memory serves me. And then prior to that, I think originally played a little bit of like Tracer and like the no hero limit era of things. But had like a weirdly strong hero pool, did a lot of things like above board, like at like that benchmark level that you kind of need to hit to kind of, break into like some of the top contenders teams and maybe low tier owl player. And yeah, I don't think ever really got a ton of like, I never got like a true fair shake at things. Obviously played for the Shanghai team that ended up winning, but like, did he really though? Probably still could probably start for a team. I think if the Valiant organization and that whole situation was a little bit more coherent and a little bit more constructive, I think that team probably could have come together. Not necessarily around his leadership, not in that way, but I think, you know, we get a better picture of like who Molly is when it comes to like the legacy of his career. And it's sad to see another kind of like 10-year veteran go again, kind of playing since 2018, being like a Chinese staple. Sad to see, but like you said, I mean, what future do a lot of these players have if they're not in the league? They can't play the game, right? That's tough.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, considering the state of APAC and how people are still scrimming and like everything,
Sure.
I think there's probably space for him, but like, I'm not sure if that's like, if I'm now at this stage in his career, would you really take it another spin? Like, I don't know. It really depends on the opportunities that you're being presented with. Because, like, real talk, I wouldn't do it for a year of Valiant again, like, or Valiant S teams, right?
Yeah, it's hard to want to do that, especially with some of the like the news and like the, you know, anecdotal info that is out there. I'm not going to quote it, but you can find it if you want to about those situations. It hasn't been good. Nothing about it sounds like it's been good. And to kind of tie it in with like the opener, it's like, okay, well, if you were to kind of like decouple, for instance, put yourself in a parental role and then try to advise Molly and say, hey, do you want to give away another year of your time to a game that is kind of getting its boots out of the mud or you know, trying to figure its way through the swamp, or go do something else, or try to, you know, maybe join the broadcast team or explore a different esport? You know, again, Valorant, you know, coincidentally just approved in China, cleared all those checks. Maybe you try to, you know, see what that's about. Maybe you go back to school. Who knows, right? I don't know what Molly's up to or what's going on with him. But even from that angle, it's like if you're trying to advise a young adult, it's like, yeah, I don't think anybody in a good conscience can be like, oh yeah, Overwatch is a great opportunity. Go ahead and give it a go. Like, I'm sorry, as much as I love the game and I love the community, I love the esport, like it's not looking great right now. It's tough.
Even if you don't think all of this, I think it's a fine time to retire, and given the normal career projection. So yeah, I don't hate it, even though like the pool of available talent in APAC is steadily decreasing, and I'm a little concerned for the quality of APAC teams generally speaking. But maybe I'm also just undervaluing whoever is left in contenders. But at the same time, I think most folks I've talked to agree that we're really starting to see the impact of like decisions or departures of structures in the contender scenes globally, really. But because if you think about it, of course, like as soon as all academy teams dropped, that doesn't mean those players now disappear, right? These guys will make it through like more amateur teams eventually, anyway. But the question is like, can you attract new ones? Because like if I'm a young talented FPS player and I see no long-term goals in the more immediate future, as in like maybe I gain sustainability through being able to join an academy roster, well, that might just be also something against the incentive structure. And I wander off to other greener pastures and other scenes that have much more regionalized approaches, such as Valorant. And yeah, like maybe I'm overstating a little bit the demise of the talent. I also think it's funny saying this after a really successful rookie season, but I wouldn't be surprised if like a couple of years down the road, we would think that this was a relative, like season 5 was the peak of what contenders brought, like the peak impact of what contenders brought to the Overwatch League. And we're now in a situation of decline where you just aren't churning out the level of quality anymore. Like back in the day, you just had competing talent forges, for instance, in Contenders Korea, right? Like you had the KDPs, you had the Lunatic Highs, you had the Genjis, you had the O2s starting, then a couple of other esports organizations like MVP, they could have like a player or two, right? Like Runaway was still there. Like that competition also just like helps sharpen the blades of all those players. If you really only have one or two organizations, and especially only O2, it feels like at it right now. Like there are others, but they're not KDP is incomparably more competitive back in the day than Pepthera, right? Like all due respect to Sunpressa Gaming, like they aren't like, you know, the I don't know, the Genji talent pipeline or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is probably the year where we will start to see a decline in efficacy of rookies coming in. I think we probably saw a decline in signings of rookies this year when all is said and done. At least, like, this is super low, like, guesstimating right now, but it really feels like it. So, yeah, it's a rough one. And in that universe, there's something to be said about veterans maybe sticking it out another year and getting more play time than they would have, you know, in previous years. Just because the quality remains there, and by the bar not raising as quickly due to you know, signing new, like, incredibly skilled talents, you can probably start your career a little bit. So, I mean, on the subject of Molly, I think that's a fair point. I think on the subject of other players of similar levels, especially more compatible with those language structures, I think I would compare Molly's to someone like Crimzo. I think it makes absolute sense for someone like Crimzo to still stick around, right? Because there's a good environment there on a team. Like, they can maybe do something, like lose Joe a lot bet, and that I think that's a much more sensible situation. If you still had incredible flex support talent come in every season, I think that's where it gets a little bit more critical. For, like, if you have 4 ultraviolets coming in this year, then it more probably, like, the tide rises so quickly that someone like Crimzo probably now has to really compete for the starting spot there.
I would imagine so. And again, to kind of send off Molly here, I think Crimzo is a fairly apt comparison. The issue is, like, they play in 2 very different ecosystems, right? If Crimzo has umpteen different teams to kind of trial for and have opportunities within, even if, you know, those opportunities aren't necessarily, like, reticent in the public's eye, at least, like, you can see, you know, maybe a Crimzo on a Houston or a Dallas, or, you know, again, teams that have, you know, dabbled with mixed rosters in the past. I'm not saying currently, but I'm just talking about it, like, in the broader scope of, like, opportunities versus, you know, a Chinese, you know, national, right? Like, there's not a ton of opportunities for these people, right? On top of that, maybe Crimzo can go back to school, can play in collegiate. We've seen that pipeline be successful for some players. There's a ton of opportunities for Western talent. APAC, again, Chinese nationals can't play the game in mainland China, from my understanding. They don't really have any kind of outside third-party structure, like a collegiate, like a, you know, any kind of university level, you know, talent. They used to have third-party tournaments. That's kind of gone by the wayside. There's really, it kind of does feel like a barren landscape for them. So again, it's a tale of 2 different cities in a way. But I did kind of want to pick your brain a little bit when it came to this looming, dare I say, recession in terms of rookies. Because I think that's always been something that Overwatch has had a great deal of success in. It feels like every season we've always had very prominent rookies stepping up. Our graduating class of rookies has always been something kind of really interesting to talk about and explore. And it was tough to imagine teams really betting on rookies last year with, an early access view of the game and what do you build for, and these GMs having to build for teams that, build these teams on a game that they've never even played. And now that we have experienced the game, now we have a playbook, now we can kind of understand a little bit of what Overwatch 2 looks like in a very like broad and kind of analytical sense. You're telling me that those rookies are going to be scaled back, you think?
Where would they come from?
That's the kind of, I suppose, golden question.
I'm sorry, but we saw the best remaining NA team come in last year, and they got stomped. Did they not? Do you think Odyssey would have would fare better this year, for instance, if they were signed somewhere? Do you think that core is not trying to at least get a win somewhere and have not any more aspirations? Like I feel like other than O2, I mean, maybe we'll get to see an opportunity, but I'd be very surprised that once like all teams are up to speed and fully scrimming and everything's going ahead, I don't think we're at a point where there's realistically as many top tier contenders rosters left that can create these storylines like an American Tornado could, where they could like beat like top 5 teams in OWL when they were at their peak in the contenders region, or O2 could farm the APAC region and split scrims against Shanghai, right? Like there is currently no talent, to my knowledge, left that can perform to that degree. And if there is, it's probably in APAC. And if they can, it's probably because APAC has lost a ton of quality this year.
I think that's fair to say. I think when it comes to, at least in my view of like integrating rookie talent, it's never been at a team level so much as it's been like fostering individuals. And I agree that like the lack of infrastructure support when it comes from, either Blizzard or the Overwatch League, franchises themselves. And again, I don't fault them necessarily for it because that's just another bill they have to pay and they ain't making money. So what do you want them to do? But I think we all agree that there isn't a ton of support when it comes to fostering these talents and making connections there. And maybe teams just don't see a ton of intrinsic value when it comes to looking and trying to make connections there or invest even non-monetarily when it comes to individuals. I don't see it at a team level when it comes to like promoting talent. I see it more at an individual level. When we have talents like Tree, where it's like, okay, I'm waiting for somebody like a Brad or somebody like keen enough, like a Krusty type of character, to place a bet and say, we're gonna lock this 15, 16-year-old phenom that's absolutely decimating everybody in NA, that is this prodigal talent, to a contract and you
can't
integrate him. I know that they can't, but again, like that's the idea. That's the idea that like I want to invest early in you. I want to like try to make that connection.
Right.
I want to like try to get you into my system, even if it's like a handshake verbal agreement type of deal.
I'll tell you what, that's going to be even less the case going forward where we're going than ever before. This is what you just described won't happen.
Can you elaborate as to why?
Because like, okay, like you have the lowering of the age limit to 17. That's good for those guys. Yeah. That also means everyone below that now, especially given the prospects of this scene, like who is thinking long term 2 years down the road of signing a player, right? That's and where would you put that guy?
Yeah,
you don't have academy teams.
There's not, and again, like that's the the $1 million question, because you do want to have these GMs and these coaches and analysts and whoever try to cherry pick some of these talents to like place bets on them. And I think
placing a bet is being nice in DMs, maybe helping out with VOD reviews here and there.
Yeah.
That's as far as you can go at this point.
Agreed. Yeah.
And maybe that's maybe enough, but once again, like we're in a position where we are now we're basically like the tweet like me when I reap, me when I sow.
Sure.
Right? Type of situation where like we were reaping the benefits of contenders quality and the tier 2 system quality and the attractiveness of this video game, especially in I would say the first 3 seasons, till pretty much season 5. And now we have a coinciding situation where probably not as many people played Overwatch, especially younger folks, especially kids that had to pay for the game that wasn't being updated for 2 years. And therefore, like that content pipeline just completely dried up, coinciding with academy teams dying, and therefore also not facilitating those that made it through the first filter, which is getting the frickin' game. So while we're now sowing like good seeds into the ground by having F2P, and therefore like providing access to a lot of young talent that can like might pick up Overwatch, might fall in love with it, might have aspirations towards pro play, it's years down the line that we will see the impact of that particular change. And it's like whatever we're doing in terms of facilitating the ability of up-and-coming talent to play, and I wouldn't say we've completely abandoned the idea. When like collegiate is interesting now, right? Like that's a pipeline that could entice some of the young talents, as it does with Tree, but that is only recent development. And for that to take place, like we will need years of development and attracting into that model and convincing folks that it's worth still buying into this. I think like there's more to it than, creating a perception of like this being a valuable journey. I think like if a kid just loves this game, they probably are undeterred and bubbled up enough in their social structure where they don't really care that or aren't as impacted by that. But it contributes in terms of like getting them to start playing this, right? It's both like, and it's a numbers game. Like in talent is a numbers game in terms of like how many people play that your particular game, and then that a fraction of those will be good enough to be at X rank, and a fraction enough of those will be good enough to play open division, and a fraction of those will stick around to play contenders and hone their skills and are good enough to compete there. And then the tippy top makes it to Overwatch League, while the absolute top talent that we filtered through 5 seasons, as long as they want to play, I think we will probably now, season 5, it made sense that we saw an uptick in like rookie efficacy, not least because O2 is absolutely nutty, and Proper is like the messianic figure of Overwatch in many ways. But the situation that we're probably going to see, like they're okay. You have Tree. You have maybe Max. You have Jonbin. Okay, these are the stories, exciting stories that are coming in this year. Maybe Top Dragon you could be excited about.
I think people are excited about Top Dragon. I would definitely include them. Whether or not that those expectations will live up, another name like He's saying, and again, like
He's saying, yeah, okay. The O2 crowd, that's like you're not going to have a counter argument.
I'm sure
like they have been farming that, but who are the other guys you're getting excited about from the contenders regions joining?
I hate to respond with a with another question, but I feel like that's the same kind of narrative structure we go through every year, no? Where like we're always kind of surprised that like, I didn't expect this guy to come through.
No.
Who did we have last year? Like, yes, of course we had Proper.
Right.
And we had AT, sure, but is that not like almost the same kind of like hand wave away that we gave O2? Where it's like, yeah, we expect them to do well. Of
I
course,
mean,
like,
we had O2 and Proper, and we had Alpha Yi, and we had like, dude, if we do a rookie draft this year, if we were to do one and compare it to our drafts from last year, dude, they wouldn't get a point. Right? The quality has dropped off a cliff.
I think I'm starting to see what you're saying.
So, like, there's a problem in terms of, I think, like, at those smaller sizes, of course, there's individual variance. You can't expect someone like Proper or even like, the other crazy good rookies like Reiner, like even people that really surprised, like Hydron. Like these guys to consistently come in. And I'm sure some of those rookies will surprise us once again. But they aren't, like, I'm not sitting here going like, oh my God, this is Runaway coming in? Season 2.
No,
yes. Oh my God, this is like, I don't know. Like there's this crazy story of Lip in the ether where, okay, that wasn't a known name in contender circles, as in like the how we talked about it in Western Overwatch, but like coaches were telling me this dude is something else entirely, right? Like I'm not hearing these stories right now to that same extent. Like it just feels like we've reached that point where our systems are leading to the inevitable conclusion that everyone that supports tier 2 and has been working in tier 2 has been pointing towards, and it's not going to be better next year either, right? Like this is it now, and to see like the positive effects of something like, let's say, collegiate, like the Calling All Heroes initiative, like Run It Back, like Overwatch being free to play. We're probably in season 7, season 8 by the time this takes fruition, and we have these folks that would have probably otherwise, like the sheer volume of folks that would have otherwise been in other games, grow into beautiful flowers and like really bloom here and show their talent. And I think, I mean, this is the logical conclusion of everything that's been going on in the tier 2 scene for the last couple of years.
And I think I'm slowly kind of coming around to that idea, because I think we built up a lot of talent previously when Overwatch was at this like fever pitch, when Apex was like going off, because even going through some of those names that we're talking about last year, obviously Proper's not a pre-Apex player, but like you have names like Alpha Yi coming into early contenders era, Korean Overwatch, where it's like, okay, these are names and players that have been like grinding the game for a long time. And now we're starting to kind of break through, right? As these holes open up, they kind of filter their way up and they get the opportunities, and lo and behold, they succeed, right? And I think we are working pretty deep within that well of water, and we're getting towards the bottom, right? And we, like you're saying, we've created structures, found structures, but it's going to take time to kind of replenish that well.
Arguably, we haven't seen the bottom of it yet. I think there's some residual, like someone like Top Dragon was on the Genji roster, right? Like that is an academy player. A lot of the great talent coming in is on O2, and okay, O2 is sustainably here. That's fine. We have also T1 shut down, right? Like there's a bunch of talent in the past that T1 presented, like the MN3s and the Zests, right? Like these are the rookies that dude. I don't know, like maybe I'm really aggregating this badly in terms of like who's coming in this year, but I feel like the rookie class last year was a slapper. Just think of the quality of players, even in hindsight now, that came in, from Proper to Reiner to Alpha Yi to like even like the talent that didn't live up to the expectations is a higher volume of the entire talent that we're getting this year. Like, it's a little rough to say Ultraviolet, for instance, underperformed, but I think also just because I had such high expectations. Like, I think I thought this was like going to be an absolute elite main flex support. I think that he can very much still be, and I think he was to a large extent that in stage 1. But like even the talents that didn't fully live up to their expectations, the volume of that is arguably bigger than what we're getting this year.
I don't think I disagree, but I do think there is some selection bias when it comes to like even just recognizing names that we've known to be like at least promising players in the past. I'll harken back to like an Alpha Yi, or I guess in some ways a Kaluge. I know Eric's kind of posting a couple names in there, but there are these players that we've heard good things about. Maybe they're too young, maybe they've never gotten an opportunity, kind of sitting and incubating within contenders and finally getting up. So I think we have like a small amount of bias in noticing those names in this graduating class and be like, oh, I know that person. I know that player is very talented. I've heard good things. Happy to see them get an opportunity. This year, we're really starting to get a real taste of like the true Overwatch 2 rookies, where it's like, I know nothing about a lot of these NA talent. Obviously, there are a couple names that stick out because, there's always those, class leaders, if you will, those valedictorians from each region that really stick out and get a lot of press and get a lot of wind behind their sails to kind of break through. But I see where you're getting at. I think I'm just like a fraction. I'm slightly less intense in how I think this rookie class might be a little shot.
I think that just like in my mind. Okay, so by the way, one team I definitely, in terms of like an elite talent forge, I forgot is Element Mystic. Sure. Just to add, and for completion's sake. Also, dude, just think of it like the team of not as crazy in actual performance rookies this year. Okay, look at Callan. You got Callan. You got arguably like the Atlanta Reign backline that I think could be elite, and I could absolutely see them becoming elite this year. Okay.
Oh, I mean,
then you have a Prita. Okay, that didn't live up to that. I feel like who else? Is there someone that you could say? I mean, but there you have almost like an entire team, right? Okay, let me go down the list. Prita, Adam. Okay, that guy didn't even get to play. Pineapple is definitely like someone that could have been.
Pineapple probably could start for a team, but there again, like, where do you put him?
Kilo underperformed. That's a name that you could put in there, right? Like, I think Chorong was fine, but probably not to the level that
anybody expected him. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then, dude, look at the list of those names. There's so many bangers in there. Like, it's nuts. Like Vigilante, dude. Like proper. Like someone Hydron. Alpha Yi, Merit, man, Backbone. Like Reiner, Paddy Pan, you have to say, like Zest, MM3, Kaluge, Finn, Proper, Vindame, Stalker, dude. This is just like elite, all the way down, right? Like,
yeah, it's a strong rookie class. I agree that this is among one of the better rookie classes that we've had. I don't think it tops 2020s by a long shot. Shout out to the worst generation. Like that in my mind, like is the best, the pinnacle.
I'm not sure. I think just by virtue of O2.
Sure, O2 is a great team, right? And like having Proper in your class is a great big boost, right? Again, like a messianic figure, I think is you're putting it gently.
I think I would have to also entertain. Like I'd have to really look into it. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you here on the
sure.
On that, but it illustrates like we had a couple of banger years of rookies. Not seeing that this year, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it does make perfect sense. What's unfortunate is that this would be the year that we would hope to see another banger rookie class, not just in just the general sense of like, oh, well, we've always had great rookies. Why does this change anything? But because this is the first, season that is built with any kind of experience for Overwatch 2. Again, Overwatch last year, the Overwatch League last year was built. These teams were built on a game they could not play.
Sure.
That is an impossible task, and yet we still had some solid teams come out of it. And I think I speak for us all to say that I'm very thankful that happened. But this is like the first year that we should see a big rookie injection to say, okay, we figured out some of the source code, we've cracked some of the puzzle.
Quick. It's too quick. Like nobody is
I'm
like.
not saying it's completed. I'm not saying it's a solved game, but at least we have our bearings about us to say, okay, we have a better idea. Now we can try to act on that. I will always respect a lot of the GMs for last season, because again, I cannot overstate this enough. They had to build a team on a game they had nothing, no knowledge on.
Right.
That is an impossible task. And I'm not trying to hand wave away any kind of disappointments or any kind of gambles that didn't pay off. I'm not gonna do that. What I am going to do is respect them and say, okay, well, at least you have next year to go off of. And because of like the state and health of things in this looming recession, and eggs cost like $8 and milk's expensive, we ain't making any money. The aliens are leaving us. Cue the Modern Warfare 2 music, right? Like stuff's rough right now. And there isn't a ton of like infrastructure to kind of pull from. That well isn't necessarily dry, but it's pretty shallow. And we have solutions, but it's going to take time. It's a mess. At least in my mind, this would be the season where we get that injection, and apparently it just, like you're saying, it might not be coming.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. It's once again, like I think there are good things in the works where,
sure, of course.
I'm interested about, like, you know what I'm talking about. This is going to be interesting. Like, what if that is the shining beacon, like the light that brings the moth and attracts the moth, right? Like, in order to make it there. I've always, I don't want to talk too much about that particular thing, but like, I think it has potential of being a new attracting point for contenders' talent, and I'm hoping that together with the increased player base of free to play, and hopefully like a increasingly like fun and rewarding experience that the developers are working on, I hope that there's a new attraction point being built. So like maybe in a couple of years down the line, like season 7, 8, that's when we then can reap the benefits of those moves. But it won't fix season 6, and it definitely won't fix maybe not even 7. Yeah.
Because again, we're gonna have to continue to plant some of those seeds, and you bring up the attraction point. Obviously, Overwatch World Cup coming back this season, 2023 World Cup info dropping earlier today, I believe. The website is up. That's going to be basically your hub for all things World Cup related. And we also got some very interesting news. Some good, some not so good, depending, but we'll kind of discuss it. What was interesting, at least from my neck of the woods, was the tie-in to the game itself. Apparently, there will be Overwatch World Cup related challenges for players to complete within the game to kind of also celebrate and draw attention to the World Cup, which I think does have its fingers within the competitive space, which means that we should see some big bunny ears there. Some interest driven to the Overwatch League itself. So, Yiska, want to kind of get your take on that. Is this as big a deal as maybe some people are making it out to be, or is this kind of nothing burger bonanza?
I mean, it's a deal for the people affected, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Also, I'll be honest. measuring my dopamine secretion and everything regarding World Cup, like measuring the excitement level there is really hard for me, and always has been. You know, like whenever we talked about World Cup, I'm just not interested.
It's not.
Like the thing is, like in my mind, especially as a European, the relevant structures of competition don't really take country into account. Like the European experience is playing with other Europeans, communicating in bad English as like, and like your parents wondering why you're all like writing all D's, but your English is a B, just because like you're learning English in the practical sense, and then having to justify why your English exam has words like pog in there, but like in that sense, like the nation level, I guess I get it a little bit, but I think mostly what has maintained through time immemorial in esports is the EU versus NA narrative. That's something like that I can get behind, just because it feels more true to how esports are actually played for a majority of Europeans. Like my gaming experiences have always been like with Swedish folks and Finnish and like then an Austrian guy, right? Like in when I competed, so it was always very European wide. There are some communities that are pretty secluded from the rest. I would say, for instance, that also just presents in the language communities that they have. I think like the French like to stick among themselves. I think we see the same phenomenon, especially like in terms of like how multimedia entertainment or streaming entertainment has developed in Spain. That's seems to be like a little bit of a cut-off community, even though you will definitely meet Spanish folks that will communicate. I think there's just a little bit more of a propensity for those guys, for those countries to play amongst each other. I think there's a similar like bonding in Eastern Europeans, or at least those Russian-speaking ones, where they play a lot with each other. You see that represented in CS teams, for instance, or also like on ladder. So I think most of it is not really on a country level. I think it's on a language-based level. That's the hard line. And it's on a cultural level, more so than everything else. And therefore, it was always really hard for me to care overly about the World Cup, because the World Cup as a concept is just fundamentally different to what it is, for instance, for football. Because in football, every country has its own like figured out talent pipeline, and like in Germany you have academies, or like there's huge industries behind that, and it makes sense to take pride in whatever system you've built up and led into your country's performance there, right? Those systems I just see on a much more European level, and I think like generally speaking, also like in looking over at League of Legends, I think they're getting way more mileage out of EU versus NA versus China versus Korea than they do of USA against Germany, against Spain, against Sweden, right? So
I wouldn't fight you if you're pushing for the World Cup to be a little bit more zoomed out to maybe being a continental scope, where it is more, because I think you're right. I think esports in general has always gravitated towards NA versus EU. I mean, I don't think we have to look too far to go, oh, we're gonna take the Western teams versus the APAC teams, right? Like, yeah, that's a narrative that I think even our audience is very familiar with, right? Like, you do have a lot of people who do kind of only watch NA, and there are obviously some people who prefer to only watch APAC, and there are those absolute deranged individuals who try to watch both, right? It's difficult, but they manage. Am I projecting? I don't know. You tell me. That said, I think I won't fight you on. If esports in general, or at least the Overwatch League, or the Overwatch esports rather, zoomed out a little bit, I think that would probably benefit a lot of people for a lot of different reasons.
Just Can I quickly give a practical example to give the?
Sure.
I think we have a lot of American viewers. It's probably hard for them to empathize because I think like USA as an entity works in Overwatch.
Yes.
Because you guys managed to win a World Cup and whatnot and be competitive, right? Because it's a country that has a population equal to Europe, right?
Yeah.
So, but what would excite you more, right? A World Cup of USA versus South Korea versus China, and then against Europe with a team like Kevster, Funny Astro, right? I don't know, like who else is like Kai for sure. Like the elite European talent that's still left in the Overwatch League. And of course, by the way, this is also a talented pipeline that's drying up much more quickly than the other scenes, just because Europe has historically always been under supported, right? But I think it's much more easy for me to see how seeing Kevster and Kai and Funny Astro on one team could excite me more in the prospect of them playing against South Korea, who could feasibly play 5 teams that are up to the level of everyone else competing, than, you know, them having to find some dude that's like, you know, GM, so Sweden has a main support or something like that, you know, like that's just not something I'm into.
I agree. And I am definitely predisposed to agree with you that I think having more competitive matches with bigger names, you know, and having like these all-star teams for your region rather than your country probably would provide a higher skill, a higher skilled product. But I think this is very in line with the original, again, the World Cup that is, and how it's structured and how it has been structured is very in line with the original view of Overwatch esports, I think, ad hoc, right? In a very particularly astute, not so astute, depending on who you ask, way, Overwatch esports has done a fantastic job at bringing in a new audience of esports enjoyers. I don't know. I can throw a stone into a field of Overwatch fans. You shouldn't do that, but I could. And I think you'd hit somebody 9 times out of 10 that is going to comment that this is their first esport. And it's because of the geolocation model. Maybe it's because of Disney. Maybe it's because of X, Y, or Z reason. But regardless of whatever reason that is, the conclusion has been we have a very green audience, right? And I think that this is another part of that pipeline, this being the World Cup, to attract just the general audience to want to watch Overwatch esports. And I think that at its heart is an attraction point, rather, to kind of tie into that the contenders discussion that we just had, where it is people inside the restaurant. I've used this analogy in the past where it's like, okay, how do I'm a restaurant manager. How do I want to increase the profit of my restaurant? Well, I have to get people in the restaurant first. It's like the least common denominator. It's like the ease of execution, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Like you're trying to increase the funnel as wide as you can to try to get as many people to become interested in it. It's not for like the top % of viewers. It's not the most skilled, because let's face it, half these teams are going to get like absolutely slobber knockered by like some of the more, you know, talent dense regions, or, you know, countries rather. So I think there are some pros and cons there, and maybe we'll get into some other cons, but it does attract a wide scope, but it's not necessarily super great at funneling or filing it down. And I think that's just a general plight of Overwatch esports in general, is we have a great base, but we don't know how to shape it up. We have all this clay, but we don't know how to mold it into a sculpture, I guess is the analogy.
Yeah. Like in my mind, it's a point of scaling, right? You can't do this if you can't. The World Cup makes sense in a world where Overwatch is the most played game in the world, like League of Legends, let's say.
Sure.
There's a much more localized scene. You have like these regionalized leagues that are supported by the developer, and it's feasible to do. Like, honestly, it just a World Cup structure makes much more sense in League of Legends than it does in Overwatch, right?
Yeah,
they circumvent that by, and even they make the decision that it's mostly about regional rivalries, right? Like, and even there, like they've enforced much more regional guidelines than we have. Like that's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
The World Cup doesn't make sense in a world where we don't region lock our teams in terms of like what kind of talent they can bring on. If London had to field 3 British players and you then had to invest into the local infrastructure of having British players, or if the like if we were a much more international league with cities across the world, like it made sense to have the World Cup that way. You entrench that way. You have big plans. It scales up. You have a representative player base. Everything is growing. You eventually can maybe it's even not even that desirable for esports orgs to sign 60% of the league to from South Korea. It's not the reality that we live in, and I would like to see it be more adjusted to that, because I fear that just seeing how uncompetitive this World Cup is probably shaping up to be, it will hurt the charm of the event. But
no,
maybe
I'm gonna come to your defense there, because I can already hear the Timmies in the chat going, well, look at the final once it's been played. It was such a good game. He's not talking about the final. He's not even talking about the playoffs. We're talking about like 90% of the games that are played in the World Cup are nothing burgers. They're not worth watching. They are there to just to be like tribalistic campfires for everybody to run around with their flags and like hope and pray that maybe their team can, win a couple games. But in reality, they didn't stand a chance versus, some of the bigger and more talent dense regions.
look,
Okay, continue.
It's like maybe this is super German pilled, and I'm not sure if you guys are like this, but attention immediately only flocks to the sports we're good in. Like Formula One was huge when Michael Schumacher was great.
Yeah,
and then it was like really popular when Vettel had a second claim to the championship. Now, I mean, I haven't looked at the ratings, but like I feel like much less people talk about it in Germany, right?
Sure.
Same is true for handball in Germany. Like we were in the World Cup finals. No, it's like an afterthought thing, right? And it feels like if your team, national team, is not really competitive there, you're probably not getting the news coverage and like not going to attract that viewer base. And like, I feel like the World Cup in 2019, like the stranglehold that like the quality of some countries have on the league in terms of like quality talent was not as expressed, I feel. And the second row, once again, this is also a contender's argument, once again, is also not as strong anymore. There's not as much coverage. I think like for countries like Germany, it never really made much sense. Like you had like a guy or you had 2 guys that at best were like competitive. Arguably like the German team that we're getting this year is probably the most competitive it's ever been with Hardy and Kahn. But that is pretty much like it's just not that exciting for the majority of it.
Yeah, I to kind of answer your statement regarding like whether or not like people from the States follow sports that we're not good at. I don't know if that's a fair question, because it's like I think it has to be the case.
Are you saying you're good in everything? Is that why?
No,
Look
it's
at
definitely
this.
not the case. But like,
you're so annoying.
that's not what I'm saying. But like, I think and I'm gonna out myself here, and I'm gonna speak for the layman. I think for Americans, their scope of like sports only orbits the things that we operate in. like NBA, NFL, hockey, everything else just doesn't even like come on the radar. It feels like, right? It's nothing blips on the radar of like what is considered a sport. People say like soccer obviously is a huge sport, and I think that's like maybe the attack vector that you can approach here, but like I don't think anybody, if you went on the street in Austin, Texas and was like, name 12 sports, people would get to like 10, 11, 12, because like that's not just something that you think about on a day-to-day basis. So it's a very odd question, I think. But to answer it, yeah, probably. I don't think that most people pay attention to things that their countries aren't very good at. That was a tangent. I forgot where I was going with this. That said, though, there are some faults here. I agree that this is kind of an archaic view of, what the World Cup could be or should be. Again, if I'm going to talk about how it, is a representation of maybe the original view of Overwatch esports. Maybe it needs to be updated because we don't have the geolocated model, like you said. We don't have like these big regional. We don't have these 32 teams that Nate Nanzer kind of wanted to run around with these numbers, and we don't have all these teams and franchises all across the globe to kind of facilitate a World Cup structure. And I love the point about the region locking, because I think that would also play well within to supporting a World Cup system and scale that up as well. But I do think there is some positives there. Obviously, there are some negatives. And speaking of those, we do have more information regarding the wild card, not so open qualifier. I think, let me double check the blog post before I throw some shade at Blizzard that they don't deserve. So in one of the paragraphs in the original Overwatch World Cup 2023 update, they say, and I quote, "In addition to the 36 selected countries and regions, the 2023 Overwatch World Cup will have a wildcard challenge that will award 4 additional spots for teams to compete. Details around the wildcard challenge will be published in February." That is verbatim what is written per Blizzard PR, right? I think a lot of individuals in the community read that and said, okay, cool, this is an open qualifier. Not the case. That is just not the case.
Yep.
Because the information that was provided today on the OverwatchWorldCup.com website lists the wildcard challenge as a 6 EMEC Europe. I don't know what that stands for, but most of the European regions and other neighboring countries. Basically, 6 teams that were on the cusp is the term that they use based on player data. Are chosen, and they will be the ones to compete for the 4 slots available. And there are quite a few countries that are missing, sadly. And you're probably waking up to or have already seen some players speaking out on behalf of not being able to even participate in the World Cup, which I think is disappointing. So I want to open a discussion here regarding if this is the right move or just a logistical sacrifice that has to be made. Is this something that you'd like to see remedied, or is this just the way things have to be right now?
I think like it's probably how things have to be right now, just because you then I'm gonna keep it a stack with you. Like the resources invested into getting everyone in and for fairness is rarely worth the investment, right? Like,
sure.
I'd much rather have like them fly out more teams and have more compete at LAN and hopefully at BlizzCon, than have them invest and like hire additional folks to like, or hire a third party or whatever it would take, and spend money there in order to get more chances for these teams. It just seems like a more efficacious, investment of funds, even though it sucks from a competitive point of view, of course, for those guys that don't get to participate. What I do have an issue with is, once again, the communication of that. That could have been absolutely like part of the first blog spot, because I assume that every one of those wildcard teams was just getting excited that they were going to be invited, we're going to have like a chance. based on the verbiage of that first article when we re-announced the World Cup and even the following ones outlining the system, where you could have just said that that's what you're doing, and then the expectation that just rip the Band-Aid off. I think what probably might have happened is that a lot of those countries that won't be invited to these wildcard tournaments already had internal talks going on, oh yeah, I'll apply, or I'm excited about this. Let's see, let's already bunch up with a bunch of players, because we already know that a bunch of these European teams were, congregating and trying to figure out who wants to play with each other.
EU Cup, and there was already kind of a pre-World Cup for EU that has been kind of going on for a little bit. So
yeah, so this is, I think, more so than, I mean, of course, this is always going to be controversial in terms of how you invest the money, because a lot of folks probably just like the fairness aspect of it. I think the better entertainment experience is focusing on that. Fair enough if you disagree on that, but I think it's really hard to argue that the communication of that fact has not been botched here, and we should have just had that information immediately.
I'll do you one better. I don't even know if this is necessarily... I agree that the communication isn't great. But when I read that initial blog post, and even from information that, I've parsed through talking to some people, I think this was an immediate remedy to even try to include more teams. I don't think that this was in the initial plans for the World Cup. I think this was kind of an oversight or a potential Band-Aid fix to try to include as many teams as they possibly could. And this is the solution that they kind of came up with, was a selective wild card event that, I think a lot of people hoped that it was going to be open. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and they just tried to include as many, again, on the cusp teams according to Overwatch 2 player population data included. Because it strikes me as odd, especially when you read that initial blog post and you get all this detailed information. It's yeah, we'll give you more information about the wild card stuff when we figure it out, because we don't know what that looks like just yet, because that just got added. At least in my mind, that's how I read that. So as much as, yes, that should be communicated, I almost don't know that was ever something they even planned for. And I have to wonder that in a very similar sense, that these wildcard events are probably going to be very hard to follow, right? This wildcard challenge is probably not going to get a ton of... Again, my expectation is probably this is not going to receive a ton of attention. It probably won't have an official broadcast, would be my guess. Because my assumption is that I don't think that this was included initially, or this. I don't think this wild card-esque addition to the World Cup was ever on Blizzard's radar, and this was kind of a Band-Aid slap on. So they're probably having to skeleton crew this, try to get it together as best they can. They can't do it super big because they don't have any budget allocated to it. That would be my guess. And these are the teams that were selected based on, the pre-established, precedent that the original, I think 36 teams was the number. They were invited also by the Overwatch 2 player data. So it's tough. So yeah, it sucks, right? It's really unfortunate. And I agree. It's probably the way things have to be for right now. And in a really kind of twisted way, even if we were to go and circle back to, maybe if the World Cup for 2024 is this zoomed out, continental or maybe a little bit more regional based and not necessarily so country based, there's going to be a whole lot of fucking people excluded, right? Sure. How many Dragon Eddies or maybe even Hotties, for example, are going to get an opportunity if we play for the EU team? The EU national team is going to be very, very, that's the upper echelon of people. Yes, of course. Hottie now probably has a great opportunity to play for the EU national team. But in reality, there's a ton of names under him that won't have any kind of opportunity. So as terrible as it is for those in countries that aren't necessarily haven't been selected for this year, and this is so unfair to say to them, it is kind of a trolley experiment, right? You're trying to limit the suffering as many people. as possible, because you are giving a lot of opportunity to people who wouldn't necessarily get it. And it's not fair to say, hey, your sacrifice is going to help foster, the next generation of Italian players, or, Spanish players, countries that, God bless them, historically haven't necessarily been super performers when it comes to the World Cup, but it helps everybody in that way. And it's not fair. Again, it's not fair at all to say that, like, oh, your hopes and dreams aren't good enough, so you have to take the bullet and we have to take you behind the barn for the good of the game. But yeah, I too also have to side on the air of this is just the way things have to be right now. Hopefully we can include everybody like we used to. Hopefully Blizzard hears your feedback, your cries at this is unfair, because there are a lot of very competitive teams that haven't aren't included. I think for example, Russia is out of the picture. I think they've always been historically very, very talented. I think I saw Psycho posting about how Austria is not available. They can't compete. I can't remember off the top of my head, and even saying that, I can't imagine that they were extremely strong performers in World Cups past. So it's tough. But there's no good solution here, I think. And I think I commend Blizzard if I'm right in saying that this is that the wild card system has been an addition to, an emergency addition to some feedback that they heard internally. So I think that that's an good job on Blizzard if that is the case. But it's also not perfect, and hopefully, we can get some communication there. These devs are running around, JSpec's running around. Hopefully we get some more communication as to why some teams weren't included. Maybe not necessarily why, because we pretty much know why. It's the player data. But I don't know. I don't know what you can say to these teams, but I don't know. More communication is probably always a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sucks to suck World Cup. It is exciting though. I think a lot of people are super excited to get in the spirit of it. I think a lot of just average Overwatch players are going to be super enticed by it, especially with the challenges coming out. Apparently there's custom cosmetics. There's going to be a leaderboard that tracks progress. Doing I guess it's probably going to be something similar to like the Olympus technology that we got this Overwatch.
I mean, that would be dope, yeah.
Where you're completing progress for your countries, and you can.
Yeah, if that's organically supported, why are we doing this for World Cup and not Overwatch League again?
Again, like maybe this is just tech that they've been waiting to roll out for Overwatch 2, would be my guess.
I didn't know this, and you just made me mad.
Okay, I'm just reading what Eric's dumping in the chat.
Yeah, no, I mean, not you personally, but the fact
that
it would be this well supported while Overwatch League isn't. Yeah, okay, we'll see.
I think that like the challenges will be successful. Hopefully the feedback from the general population is that these activations, as buzzwordy as that sounds for the general populace of the Overwatch like fan base, is like attracted by this, is interacting with it, is engaged with it, that this technology can be moved over to the Overwatch League, because it feels like a very easily integratable system. Again, I'm not a developer and I'm not trying to like do anybody's job, but it feels like really easy is not the word here, but it feels very intuitive. That's maybe the better word to say, hey, we're going to track how many Overwatch League team skins get so many kills, and we're going to have a leaderboard based on the kills that each team got, and maybe we can break it down by hero and whatever. Like, I think I have to assume that this technology is like was saved for Overwatch 2. That would be my guess, and we should be getting some integrations like that coming in the future for the Overwatch League. I would hope.
Yeah, Okay, fair enough. I guess it's not too much of a time investment, I suppose. Like reading through it, reads like the particular skin that they're getting is probably like akin to the efforts that you generally got through the skins provided to the winners of the Overwatch League. So fair enough. Maybe it's just equal effort, but even equal effort feels a little offensive to me in terms of like how serious the Overwatch League should be treated by this game, right? Like, ideally, like maybe that's in the works and whatnot. It would surprise me if it became a large extent, because presumably that would have been communicated to an our ownership level. But I feel like that just more of a support for the Overwatch League in the game proper would go such a long way. Not just, like MTX for teams, where we can create a revenue pipeline, which definitely should happen. And by the way, I just wrote a news today on PUBG esports. Interestingly, by the way, and Gen G is one of the partners teams for 2023, and they are getting MTX and revenue share for team skins right off the bat for those partnership teams. So, of course, like I think to a certain degree, this probably already happens. But I think in Overwatch, I mean, So yeah, we'll see. It's definitely like a long way to convince developers that their esport is a valuable asset to their product. And it makes sense that especially publicly traded companies cannot be enticed to take that same risk, while someone like Riot can, spend much more on their investments there, and really craft something cool and unique every year, and also, think wide and creatively what the world's experience should be. I just wish we had that as well, and client integration goes a long way. I feel like, am I wrong to think like the League client has constantly like worlds plastered, and you get the skins, and you can watch through the client, and like.
I'll do you one better. I think the Riot client in general for League of Legends like does a better job at promoting the esports even at a domestic level, right? Like if I load up, do it right now. I'm gonna load up. As I say this before my computer blue screens, if I can find it. This is the League PBE. Let me see if I can load this up. Oh no, here's League of Legends. There we go. I think what they do really well is they just plaster even domestic stuff. Like, I don't know how many times in the past that I would see like, Bjergsen versus Double Lift, the Clash of the Titans, like just right front and center before you even click the play button, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and that's again separated from Worlds. Worlds, you would hope and assume that would be the case, right? Like you would hope that the World Championships would be, advertised everywhere you could advertise it. But I think they're even doing that and tailoring it to the region that you're like logging into.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean,
but I agree. Like we should see more client integration. We should, if esports is this marketing tool that, we're kind of
that's the problem though, right? It isn't seen as such.
You don't think so?
It isn't.
Maybe
it isn't. It isn't seen as such. Like I think that was something. I mean, of course, there's a certain bias there. That owner, or rather, like the panelists, and specifically, I think Grant, like felt like they're like an esport like League of Legends has just a much higher priority in the development cycle of League of Legends than it ever would for Overwatch, right? Like for Blizzard, Overwatch League, right?
Yes,
so the marketing argument there, and no question asked, like that League. I'm not sure if it's cost effective what they're doing with their esport. Probably. I think there's probably an argument to be made that that's not cost effective, and they're paying premium for the exposure that they're getting through the esports teams. presumably hoping that this will eventually pay off as they get a complete stranglehold on the thing that is esports.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, we're not taking those bets despite having a sizable investment, as Jacob Wolf once again recently reported, with like some folks like spending as much as 16 million at this point, in both franchise fees and overhead costs from players and whatnot. So operational costs. That
doesn't seem like a marketing expense, and I agree. Like the way that this all was pitched initially does not scream marketing expense. Obviously, different economy, different time and a place, different era of history, right? This is pre-COVID, right? Like it everything is so much different now. But I couldn't agree more that this is the infrastructure that we've built our esports league upon is not under the pretense of a marketing expense so much as it is like this its own individual thing, because there was still those that assumed it could be that. But I think the overall landscape, especially these days, post-COVID, maybe even in the midst of a recession, depending on who you ask, I think we have to kind of hide under the rock of a marketing expense now. And I think we have to shift in that direction. And I think that also could be why we're starting to see the World Cup come back. Obviously, yes, this is, one of the first years that, the world is kind of a little bit more open. That also has to do with it. But I think as we see the world, more information regarding the World Cup roll out, I think people might be surprised at how much, they're wanting to invest in something that is a little bit archaic when it comes to, the overall scope of Overwatch esports in general, because I think that this is a part of it, right? And I think this more so than anything else is probably the most cost-effective way to celebrate Overwatch esports and try to cater to that crowd that would, be more engaged, I suppose, is the best way I can articulate it at this point.
Sure.
And marketed too, right? That your target audience is probably more within the World Cup crowd, sadly, than it is with Overwatch League right now. And I think that's a problem. I think that there's like significant steps to be made when it comes to Overwatch League to try to get in touch with the viewer, as general as that sounds. And it's not on the teams necessarily per se, even though I think I can't blame the teams. They like you said, 16 million, nobody's making any money, why add another bill? Like I can't fault them for it. It's just a crummy situation all around, and it's tough to make much movement. That's where you kind of have to look at Blizzard as the culprit here.
Sure, yeah.
It's tough not. But yes, World Cup is coming again. As much as maybe that sounds kind of poo-pooing World Cup, I think it is going to be an exciting time. I certainly will watch. I certainly will be participating.
There could be a couple of good games for sure.
100% there will be. Will there be a lot of them? Probably not.
Yeah.
But these are going to be fun games, right? These are going to be fun to kind of rally around the individuals or the the valedictorians, the front runners from maybe each country, maybe interviewing some of these teams, getting maybe even from my own journalistic point of view, yours as well, like getting maybe entrenched with a team and like maybe trying to bring out the personalities of these teams. Because again, one of the beauties of the World Cup is to discover unknown talent. And maybe they're not the best players, but they're people who you kind of want to root for, right? Be it for a story or, be it for, their actual skill that, they've slipped through the cracks and somebody hasn't discovered this kid from Estonia that is, this crazy good player, right? Like, who knows, right? They're always, I think people are always capable of creating, or not creating, but like having stories that, resonate with others. So it'll be interesting to see. Is that kind of on your radar at all? Are you dabbling with any ideas for World Cup?
Hell no.
Okay,
I'm sure we'll do something about it, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Like, I'll probably maybe interview some of the
Sure.
like once the top teams have crystallized. But I think like in terms of
Yeah.
sheer coverage, well, we'll see. Maybe it's of course, like we have to go where the audience interest is. Maybe I'm underestimating just based on my own feeling how it's going. It's not something that's on my mind right now. Maybe it should be, but yeah, we'll figure it out when we get there, I think.
Sure, of course. Amongst other news, we did have some interesting developer updates regarding a whole bunch of things. There's some competitive updates. Yiska, are you excited to know that you won't need to play 7 games to get a competitive update regarding your ranking? You need to play 5 or win 5 and lose 15 instead of 20. Is that a step in the right direction, or would you just rather SR come back?
Well, it's a step in the direction where they tell me after every game where I went. So that's, I guess, is good.
Sure.
Look, I'm just trying to snipe some dopamine. Okay, that's what I'm trying to achieve. I want a number. Give me a juicy number. Plus 27 when I generally get plus 19. Pog. That's where I or like the anticipation of hopefully that doesn't hurt my MMRs. Minus 23. Oh my god. Like that's a good dopamine fast right there. I personally like the why am I delaying gratification in my gaming, dude? That's the one part where I shouldn't be an adult about it. Like,
you're right. You're right. You shouldn't have to wait. And the more that I'm currently sitting and thinking of this, because I'm gonna keep it a stack, to use Yiska's Zoomer terminology. Don't actively think about why companies do this, but the fact that it hit me right now, I think says a lot. They don't want you to snipe it. It's not in their best interest to have you snipe your dopamine. They want to keep you engaged for as long as possible without it being overly.
I think that doesn't work for me, because you know what happens once I hit the threshold where I see the rank? I log off for 2 weeks.
I think that's you.
Downgrade, and like now I can't, like I'll need to play through presumably at least 10 matches, or beforehand like on average 14 matches in order to have another of those dopamine shots.
Right.
Nah.
Yes.
Goodbye. Like, I'm not opening.
I think there is a section of the community that agrees with you, but I also think that there are some bad actors that say that they'll want to do that, but then they just rage, try to get another 5 wins in to try to get another dopamine shot of like getting their rank.
I think realistically, this is I think your interpretation of the intention behind this feature is probably a little bit more nefarious than I would expect the real reason to be. I think they just try to combat rank anxiety and try to lessen the blow of an immediate loss. The thing is, like, it just led to a lot of, as they said, like, lack of comprehension of how the rank system works, even more than it already previously did. People don't understand ELO systems.
I know they don't. And like the fact that they still have to come out, or they feel the need to come out and be like, why are you putting me in the losers queue? It's like, what? Who?
Yeah.
I've never heard that terminology before. Like, what? Yeah. Like, I feel for the devs that have to like try to explain this to people, because A, where are you getting that from? Who is trying to like peddle this? And B, why do you think it's the dev's job to explain to you why you aren't climbing?
I think there was something like I'm remembering something, and don't nail me to this, but there was a what's it called when you intellectual property, when you a patent for like from Activision Blizzard a while ago, where they did something with matchmaking and manipulation of who you play against in order to maximize like excitement, and it came off a little more nefarious in wording than it probably was. That's my recollection of it, or my conclusion. That's how I structure my life. I look at the thing, and the only thing my mind remembers is the conclusion that I drew at 3 a.m. After like 2 liters of caffeine and desperate lack of sleep. But generally speaking, like, I think there probably are reasons to distrust the integrity of the ranked system. I think there were probably some buggy things in there that I didn't see acknowledged. Maybe not. Maybe there's just like some very outlier observations that just sometimes will happen. But yeah, I think in general, the many factors that go into your ranking is probably a little bit overwhelming for the majority to aggregate and like think of when they recollect how their last couple of matches went. So while I see the benefit in trying to, keep people from having ranked anxiety, I think realistically, if your average amount, like 7 wins, means at a target rate of 50% win rate, means 14 games on average that the average player ideally would play in order to get a newer ranked unlock. That's not an amount of games that you play in 1 or 2 days. So how realistic is it that you have even like a resemblance of recollection how all of your games went, and that you aren't surprised where your rank went after the fact, after it course corrects, right? Like there's no way, like if I'm playing 2 games on Monday and then like maybe I play 2 on Tuesday and then maybe towards the weekend I get my 14 in, I don't remember my Monday, how I fed on Monday and Tuesday, right? Like, and then I'm like, wait, I'm pogged off this weekend. Like my carry friend on his Smurf was on and like carried me. How did I demote or whatever, right? And it's like, well, it's hard to recollect and aggregate like your performances over such a large volume of games, right? So I think it's not just poor comprehension, it's also expecting people to aggregate in a way that makes it like feel rewarding and or sensical, even emotionally.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the word rewarding. I don't think that ranked is properly rewarded. I don't think you are accurately incentivized to play any kind of ranked. Period. The end. I think you had an interview that we've referenced a couple times on the show now with Shockwave, where it's just like, why do you want to climb to rank 1? Just to have bragging rights, right?
I mean, yeah,
Like,
that's another thing. Like, they fortunately fixed this. I think top 500 gets immediate updates now, so that's fine. Like the top is figured out, right? In terms of like,
I think it could be figured out a whole lot more.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you can give more benefits and whatnot. That all like it's such a it's a nice carrot on a stick. In the grand scheme of competition, I think it's less so important. I think this is just a fundamental problem of like how you design your competitive experience and what kind of emotions you're trying to guard your audience from, and what kind of just like comorbidities, I guess, you have coming alongside your change. And I'm not sure if that trade-off was worth it. I would be super interested how many matches on average the average Overwatch player plays, or the median, because I could totally see that people probably need 2 weeks in order to get a ranked update. You can't remember the games that you played 2 weeks before, right?
I think it severely depends on. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think it really depends on if you actually play with anybody. I think for the like actual solo players who like have nobody to play with and only solo queue ranked,
right?
I agree with you. It probably takes maybe multiple weeks to try to get a ranked update, which is just entirely too long. There's a dopamine fast, like it's just not enough, which makes me have to assume that this is just like a metrics buffer that Blizzard's engineered. And it is kind of interesting, and it is like uncharted territory to like deviate away from like your standard like elo thing. And I understand that a lot of the PR around it has been like against like ranked anxiety, and I think that's like a noble cause. It's hard for me to decouple away from a corporation not trying to like juice their numbers with any kind of like dopamine engineering. You know what I mean? Like try to keep you
you gotta stay
right.
competitive, right? Like it's not even like
everybody's doing it. So
as nefarious as you think it is, like your app is doing that. Like Overwatch is competing with TikTok, my guy. Like this is 2023. Wake up.
Shit, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it can't be viewed as like maybe I'm nitpicking it being nefarious, and I think that's fair. But if we're also going to say that everybody's doing this, then is it really like nefarious, or is it just the lay of the land? Like, are we really surprised that like
it can be both? It can be both. It can always be both in what hellscape we're living in.
True. So it's like, you know, is it ranked anxiety? You know, is it is it a comprehension thing? I think you use that term. Or is it it's a little bit of column A, column B, column C? I think it's a little bit more incentivized, or there's a lot of lack of incentivization at the top level, even at the mid level. I think people don't. I'm gonna do some big napkin math here. I'm gonna do some large assumptions for all the Timmies in the chat. Big assumptions incoming, so brace yourselves. I think Overwatch has a terrible population to like ranked index, right? Like I do not think an acceptable number of like the general audience of the game
that's another thing,
like sniffs the fart of a ranked ladder.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, no, that's definitely probably true. I then again, I don't think it's that big of a problem. I think that's probably one of the.
It's a big problem for the competitive side of things.
Sure, like I think what is happening is like that they probably saw that, and that's one of the reasons they have this system in place, because like they like look at the reasons. Why would people not queue competitive and instead play quick play?
Why would they?
Well, they would because.
What am I chasing? What am I getting?
Well,
like anything cool.
Presumably a more serious, more structured, less chaotic.
You would hope.
More streamlined experience of competition that you're striving towards, like bettering yourself, like you're enjoying the matching of the minds there.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that the carrot probably is not strong enough. That's definitely one of the levers that you got to pull. But the other one is like maybe, oh my God, it's actually kind of scary to play this.
Sure.
And ranked anxiety is a thing that has been true for like a long time in competitive gaming, right? Like
nobody wants to lose their rank. You get to your peak and you don't want to lose it.
Yeah. And that makes some sense. I just don't know if we're really outpacing whatever we're losing through the delayed gratification there. And I think like Overwatch seems to have recognized this. Like they definitely said like we recognize that the experience or the feedback is that the experience hasn't been rewarding enough. I think they probably also see that in the player numbers that are logging in. I'm sure they're like not super amazed that this is the first season coming up without a hero, and their player base probably already dropped off the planet. In terms of which is to be expected, right? Like when a new game launches, you have spikes at the start, and then it drops off heavily. But I think I don't know. It's super hard to intuit the situation. I would say that it's probably a harder drop than they anticipated. For myself, from my own experience, I feel like I'm myself surprised how little staying power Overwatch 2 had in my daily consumption of video games.
Sure.
Like I'm definitely feeling the lack of reward, and it seems like that my social circle has also gravitated away from it. So like even the social aspect of it is diminishing to a certain degree, where even the most hardcore crack fiends of Overwatch that play like several hours a day have now practically entirely stopped playing for the moment. So I think we're having some issues with the carrot of the game. I think the core gameplay is probably. I feel like a lot of the complaints we see with the core gameplay is just a boredom with the entire ecosystem and like us expressing or misattributing our lack of enjoyment in just like not having these FOMO and not just FOMO or in devious systems, but just like legitimate things to do in the game and to achieve and to grind towards. And like all of that is like seems so weak on the chest for Overwatch, right?
Overwatch, since its inception, has been an incredibly shallow game. Have we gotten better? Yes, I think the battle pass has helped. Maybe in some sense, this new generation of like Overwatch accessible players that are trying the game, falling in love with the game, maybe grinding out all the heroes and like playing all those games that you have to get the heroes and unlock them, like that'll help at least, give you a carrot, because there really isn't much else. And I think that will always be my attack vector in discussions like this. We have nothing to work for. We have no and again, I'm not getting into any kind of balanced discussions, but there's nothing to unlock. There's no perks to get. There's no prestiging. There's no guns to unlock. There's nothing to kind of work towards. There's no carrot. You just play the game because you like playing the game, and sometimes that's enough. In modern gaming, I don't. That's the case. That'll probably change with PvE, but that's TBD.
You know what? Okay, I'll hit you with the exact counter example that you probably wouldn't necessarily immediately think of. But a game that had the all-time greatest carrot on the stick, trying to emulate it, like goated incentive structure in terms of a wide audience appeal, was Pokemon Go. And it's not just intrinsically through the game, but what it made culturally. So, how were you incentivized to grind Pokemon Go? Well,
to go outside, walk around.
It gave you the impression, or rather, actually, like made you exercise in some way. It made you reconnect with like a nostalgic feeling. It made you connect socially. Now you're like in a social environment, talking to people that you probably rather like. Even introverts were talking to other folks. And then came the other systems around. Dude, I could get a free subway because I was a particular level in Pokemon Go for a while in Germany, right? And like that has nothing to do with the core gameplay. It actually sucked in comparison. It wasn't that fun,
no,
right? Like the idea of like walking around and like the first like glimpses of the average normie's understanding of AR or augmented reality to a degree was happening there. And you were fusing like your physical environment with video games, which is kind of like almost like the Avatar effect, where, the content of Avatar is garbage. The technology around it is amazing for the time it was initially launched. I feel like if that is the one part of the spectrum, Overwatch as a modern game in terms of its competitors has to be on the other side of any live service game, where like you can get away, like it's totally fine. And I think Blizzard excels at being the game or creating the games that you uninstall uninstall or you play it, you uninstall it 8 months later. There's an update, you're getting back on that. That's not a live service game experience that you want for your game.
No, it's comical that you're bringing this up, because there's a deep part of my soul right now that I'm like, bro, I am so bored with gaming. I'm almost gonna go back to Diablo 3 for like the 18th time.
Same.
For my month binge of Diablo 3, and then uninstall it and forget it exists until Diablo 4 comes out.
Yeah.
Like you're so entirely correct, and that's built on like the Blizzard of old and that polish, and they create good games. But for whatever reason, this company has walked into the modern age of gaming so slowly, so Blizzard slowly, that it is frustrating to try to get those orbiting tertiary, like, give us a subway, give us something to go and do.
It's also so misaligned on everything. Like, it's like how we talked about, like, the misalignment of, like, the competitive structure of World Cup to the realities of Overwatch esports. Now zoom out into the macro, like the alignment of an esports league of a title that wasn't free to play for the first 5 seasons of its competitive structure is crazy talk. Like, your systems are not aligned. You slapped an esports onto that and didn't create none of the sensible systems of, like, a live service update that you most definitely need, right? Like, it feels like this is just like this humongous, like, it's like a Dark Souls boss that just has, like, some limb slapped to its carcass and it's just, like, trotting around. Here we have an esports, and here we have, like, we're getting the PvP arm as well, like, in phase 2, we're slapping it on, and it's like, oh no. And the player is just like, yeah, I'm having a real Dark Souls experience here because I feel fucking, like, rolled over and, like, shed on by this game's ecosystem where it's no coherent, like, developmental foresight into where I want to go. It's like, oh yeah, we have a video game and that esports thing, eh? Like, it. Meanwhile, Riot is like, okay, there's a competitive shooter that's having a lot of market share, and it's very old. Maybe we can give it our own fresh coat of paint, and then we structure the entire leagues around that, and we structure, like, we built upon existing systems that we've raised from the ground in terms of League of Legends. We have these studios and this, like, they are actually working within the real world of things, and there's very little fat in comparison to, like, the external things. Like, you don't see necessarily, like, Riot being too much like, okay, let's do what Fortnite does and just, like, introduce, like, the rockin' Valorant and whatnot. Like, like, that's such that if that was to happen, like, that would be such a Blizzard move. Like, oh my god, let's we did the competitor analysis and let's slap that feature on top, and, like, it's just like, okay, now the Dark Souls boss just has 7 phases. Okay, like, I'm just rolled.
No, I would probably argue that Riot's games tend to actually have a lot of fat, but it's not, like, intrusive. Like, there's a lot of, like, in the most pure sense of, like, cooking, there's a lot of, like, butter involved in Riot's recipes, and it adds a lot of, like, flavor for everybody, right? Like, it transports a lot of flavor for the general audience, where you're getting all these cool skins, and it's very in tune with, like, what you're already interested in. So it's a lot of, like, cultural references. It's a lot of, like, weeb stuff. It's a lot of anime. It's a lot of, everything pop culture related. And, like, yes, Fortnite is very fatty as well, because, like you said, The Rock's in there, and Naruto, and, like, any any kind of, like, gaming adjacent medium is probably in Fortnite. I think, in a fucked up way, Overwatch and Blizzard needs a dose of that, and I think they're starting to come around to it. And I think where I'm headed with this, right? We need other things to do. Overwatch needs other things to do. It's a shallow game. People want to love the game. Give them other avenues to love the game. Does that make sense?
Sure. But what about DJ Khaled at BlizzCon again?
Okay, that is an extra arm on the patchwork fight, which I think was actually an ironically beautiful example that you gave, and we can get into why that is later, because we're already going long, and we need to get to Shanghai, because apparently the rumor is spinning about the Shanghai Dragons this year. So says Halo of Thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently Bebe's possibly going to be an assistant coach, and apparently
Fleta, what a backgetter, legendary backgetter.
He is.
actual
I mean, the man with
performance.
the best smile in esports better be a bag getter. If there was anybody who was gonna be a bag getter, it better be fucking Bebe. Right?
Crazy amounts of just ability to continuously get paid in an esports where nobody does. It's nuts. Yeah, I respect it, dude. Like, this is.
You got to.
Yeah.
You have to. My XX boys stay getting stacks, okay? They got bans on bans. Choi's got 2 titles. God bless Time Boy. Gods be people like him. Bebe's like still kicking. Like, I'm here for it.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, Choi carried the team. Bebe carries the
That's
water.
right. He carries the bank account in his wallet. That's where he carries.
Oh, dude. Water on me like a sauna.
It's big one, you know. What are you gonna do? You know, NetEase ain't doing so hot with relations with Blizzard.
Yeah.
We're seeing more players transition into coaching. Moon's probably going to need some help to, you know, make this roster runnable. And I think Halo continues to talk about how, you know, Fleta may come back, but apparently is going through a trial process that, you know, is
as he should. Like, I think one big thing that you gotta figure out at this point is, like, yeah, is your heart still in it? You know,
sure.
That's
This kid's been going since day one. It feels like Fleta's been going hard in Overwatch.
Yeah,
the original diamond in the rough, right? Like, this kid defined team jail for years, it felt like.
Yeah,
and we're going into a new game, 2024 on the horizon. Not 2024, but like the 2023 season on the horizon. Like, he's been at it since the start. You have to question if you're really still in it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Like, dude, I'm so Duma pilled on APAC. We will see. Like, I feel like it's NA viewers are feasting. I'm wondering where this is going. Yeah, we'll see. This is one where we have to play by ear in terms of, like, how this develops.
Well, okay, let me throw this at you then, because obviously we have not heard much developments out of APAC outside of, like, maybe Spark. We've had, you know, the Infernals rebrand, but outside of that, it's been pretty much radio silence. We're getting at least some developments regarding Shanghai coming through Halo's pipeline. But when we look at this team, it's kind of already a carcass, right? Lip's gone. Izzyaki and Lee Jagon are in Boston. Molly's retired. Bebe's possibly a coach. Void retired. Do you keep anybody? Do you want to reassign Fate? Is that somebody who you put through trials?
Probably. Who else?
Who are you? Is that somebody you put through trials? I have to say yes.
Sure.
Homie can play Genji.
Dude, like, once again, we're back to like the first topic we talked about. There's nobody. Who else?
Well, okay, see, that's where I think this is the inverse of the topic, where it's like we have a bunch of old heads that like are good, but I'm almost more keen on trying to find the who else than just re-upping a who are you contract. You know what I mean? Or like taking on Fleta for, you know, the farewell tour.
Sure.
You know,
like,
I'd rather grab a rookie.
The thing is, like, are you really at this point trying to invest in multi-season projects of, like, trying to figure out who the diamonds in the rough are and giving these kids playtime, or are you giving, you know, the legends of the game a last hurrah?
It's tough. I can see I can see pretty much one angle for this, and it's probably trying to make as big of a stand as you can with the time that you have, right? Especially for the APAC teams, because like you're saying, they have to figure something out. It's not cleanly in APAC with, you know, mainland China not being able to access, from my understanding at least, most Activision Blizzard products. Like, that's just a huge detriment to that ecosystem as a whole. And without that, things get tricky. Are there solutions? Possibly. There could be. but we don't know the efficacy of those solutions as they stand right now. They sound great on paper, but I don't know how that works out. Maybe it's a hit, maybe it's, maybe it's fantastic and we're all fine and dandy. But I think a lot of those solutions that people have kind of talked about, we've never really seen tested, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm also, can I be honest? Zero excited for the Shanghai Dragons.
I mean, there's literally nothing to be excited about.
Yeah.
They have no one. Like, if it'd be a different story if they started.
And they can't have anyone. Like, nobody they could sign to have me Pog. Like, Top Dragon, maybe. Everyone else.
Yeah. If they were like the ones to kind of land Top Dragon, I think that would be excitable, right?
I don't know. Who else is there? Fitz, Iris, I guess. Like, even if you were to assemble like the best remaining players, and like you still would have to demonstrate to me that they care enough to, give like Pelican level effort, and then I might grow to care upon signing. I don't know. Like, not in contrast to the Shocks of the world, the Atlantis of the world, the Houstons of the world. No, not even against the Sparks.
I mean, yes, that goes without saying. I think the Spark, in a weirdly, again, I think 2023 is going to be a lot of weirdness, coming from like the team narratives, because like, yeah, it is an exciting time to like want to like watch the Hangzhou Spark, whereas maybe expectations have to be shifted for Shanghai Dragons and maybe even APAC as a whole. Whereas in the past, like that was, I think you and I both kind of cut our teeth in watching Korean, some Chinese, some, APAC, related content. And that's slowly not becoming the case, which is, it's unfortunate, but I think it's just a shift of things. I think Shanghai has some possible outs, but like many teams, they have to start moving, right? They've got to really figure things out. They have to act quickly because it doesn't sound like they've been able to. Maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but it is tough. It doesn't look easy, and maybe Shanghai's legacy is like a top team is dead, right? I don't know that we can consider them a top team. Stands. Obviously, that's easy to say right now because they literally don't have a fucking team. I get it, YouTube commenter. But even with what Yiska's saying, with the foresight of looking at the talent pool that we have, can with the free agents available, at least publicly, you assemble a team that can compete at the Shocks level, at Atlantis level?
No shot.
It's nearly impossible. So when I say that the Shanghai Dragons like world-class legacy is pretty much buried at this point, it's for, it's measurable reasons. This isn't just a knee-jerk reaction. It's just kind of the lay of the land. Like, there's not much you can do.
It's worse than that, Joe. It's like, even if you sign, like if you put the literal San Francisco Shock into APAC, and yeah, there's some interesting developments there, that the issue I'm about to outline is less severe than it might appear at this point. But your practice is also going to be subpar in comparison to NA teams. And once you then meet them at international events, you get your shit kicked in.
That's to be expected.
Put the best players in the world, the best team in the world, in an environment of no competition, and see them degrade to like levels of like outside of top 5 in no time. Like maybe as little as 1 meta.
I think I agree with you in the utmost general sense that like if everything was equal, you should always see that APAC is like slightly behind. But as we've seen throughout the years, especially when we've been post or mid and post COVID, I I think the reads are just different, and I think we'll always have like really, really interesting takes from both sides of the world most of the time. Obviously, there are very rigid metas that like everybody just is in agreement that like you just play this thing and it's very good and that's all you can play. But I do wonder if it's going to be like readily noticeable, I guess is maybe the term, because it's just going to be so different. That's kind of my fallback.
I mean, you can't
APAC.
surprise in a couple of metas and whatnot. Like maybe they're like certain strength of like the situation that they're in. Maybe they're more fluid and maybe they can react a little bit quicker. Even though I'm not sure if that's true, but yeah, all of that just comes from the historically better pipeline of access to South Korean talent, which is diminished, and maybe I'm underestimating how depleted Korean contenders is, and maybe it is very strong still, and especially like for the APAC teams like being able to scrim there. I think that like the worst teams in APAC will probably always be better than the strongest teams, the worst teams in NA, just because like they get phased out and have to then scrim like the contenders talent that in no way is better at this point in NA than in contenders either. So there's an argument to be made that their lowest lows aren't going to be as low, and they weren't in Season 5 as well. I think the Valiant and the Charge were consistently better than, you know, even the NYXL and
definitely,
you know, the Eternals. That's probably a property I would still ascribe to APAC, that they're never going to be bottoming out to the degree that some A teams can. But that's as far as I can feasibly go at this point in time. I think historically I've been always on board with the idea that APAC is the stronger region by comparison. I think I stopped believing that in Season 5. Season 4 it felt true. But this year, I mean, at this point, there's no reason to believe that Season 6 APAC is remotely as strong as NA.
No, and there's a ton of just like unfair reasons as to why that is. They're literally playing at a disadvantage right now, right? Like logistics dictate that this should be the weakest region.
Yeah.
Period, bar none. End of discussion. Will that be the case? Kind of remains to be seen, but it's an uphill battle. That's for damn sure, right? Again, a whole like section of the world can't play the video game and has to be, a solution has to be created for them to even get there and play a video that said video game, right? That can't be understated. So yeah, Shanghai fighting an uphill battle, APAC fighting an uphill battle. It's tough out here. Austrian players not being able to play in World Cup fighting an uphill battle. It's rough. But we hopefully, should be getting some information soon. Apparently, people have been cooking in the kitchen, so have tweeted the Overwatch League official account. As much as, this send-off as we wrap things up does sound kind of doom and gloomy, it's not necessarily. There's some bad things happening.
Some of it is exciting depending on how it is going to be implemented and how the system is going to be.
It's all about execution. At the end of it.
I'm super interested in how it will be received by the community, because I've like some of the aspects are going to, of course, dominate the discussion, and that will shroud a little bit of the issues that I personally see. And I think we will feel those by the time that we're actively in that moment. I will see. I have a particular problem with like season format, but we'll see.
Sure. And again, once Eric's kind of typing in our chat here, talking about maybe Sean Miller's finished cooking, season 3 starting next week. I think it's very likely that we will have some developments on that front. What all is developed, whatever, what that dish looks like coming from Casa de Miller, I don't know, but I'm very confident that we will be getting some more information regarding probably the Overwatch League, possibly more World Cup information. Maybe, I mean, obviously season 3 starts, so we'll probably know what the hell season 3 is about. But on the competitive side of things, I'd be pretty confident in saying probably be getting some info. And obviously, stay tuned here. We'll probably disseminate it all and try to parse it out, and hopefully we'll bring some people on to help us do that. But in a news desert,
We did it, Joe.
we
ass pulled
2 hours out of this.
We ass pulled 2 hours out of this on wild tangents like it's 2019. John would be proud of us.
We are nothing but a beach episode podcast. Okay, I want everybody to know that we are great at going to the beach when we need to. Yeah. Not that any of this was. I want to make this very clear. None of that was just like trying to make discussion for discussion's sake. Like
we just go there because we're neurodivergent like that.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah.
And hopefully it was interesting. Because yes, there has not been a ton to talk about. But next week we should have some stuff. We should hopefully have a guest in the works. I have a couple people I'm interested to talk to. So we'll see. And yeah, got some things in the works. But Yiska, what's coming up from you?
Oh, dude, I did a player panel. It was all going so well. I got POG guests. We had great topics. The guys were juicing, and my internet kept crapping out. So I got like 1 hour.
What is that?
Okay, I've got 1 hour of 45 minutes. I think 45 minutes of those are fine. Otherwise, the rest of the recordings are probably like every 3 minutes, my internet kept lagging for 30 seconds, and it almost becomes
discernible.
Indiscernible speech.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how I'm going to resolve it. We're going to make it work somehow, but yeah, it's going to be bad as a listening experience of folks just like consuming it as like a podcast that they want to have on a second monitor.
Yeah.
Because there's very few good solutions that won't break immersion. Like the best we could probably do is like subtitles, but then you have to read. Or like me doing the VO, and then am I going to narrate what I said and they said, and like everyone's confused? Do I change my voice for some players?
Probably not. I'm gonna guess.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to start doing like Cali accents. I'm gonna promise you that much.
I'd love to hear that though, just for my own selfish.
Dude, the German Cali accent is something like that shouldn't be unleashed on the world ever.
Want to talk about a weird patchwork? Like,
I like if I ever do a panel with Zizek, I'm up for that. But until then, like you won't get.
The world is not ready for the internal dialogue panel that is the multiple voices in Yiska's mind, because one of them is esports Slavo Zizek, and you have to subscribe tier 5 on the Patreon.
Pretty much, yeah.
Or just join the Discord, but
yeah, no. So that's probably, hopefully, releasing this week. It will, because I'm off next week. Pog. Probably, yeah. And then after I already got 2 player interviews booked, I definitely want to talk with a guy, and I'm not going to reveal the name. A player who probably has the best balanced take out of all of them. I feel like that guy consistently nails it. Like sometimes, as you can imagine, I get like a couple of screenshots from the Owl Discord, and consistently this guy nails it on the head. So I'm looking forward to probing his. I wish he could have participated in the player panel. Just wasn't possible, but we'll do it that way, and hopefully without lags that time.
Hopefully, I think that's definitely a recipe for success. I think people are going to want to hear what the players have to say. Me, not much. I'm baking. I don't know if anybody's seen my Twitter feed. Pretty much just food. I'm on my house husband arc. I'm making food. Okay, I'm practicing life skills. I don't know what that says about the state of my mental health, but it's not a bad thing. I'll tell you that. That's for sure. Yeah, not too terribly much. I need to get cracking on a big project that I'm going to finish prior to some dates coming up. So keep that in mind. And not much else. Trying to, I have this like hole in my chest that I need to fill with Overwatch. That sounds way darker than it was actually supposed to be. Like I'm itching to get back into like VOD reviewing and like watching and like having takes about teams and like the X's and O's of it. Like I'm itching to get back into it. So hopefully the league starts up soon. Because I'm done sitting on my hands for the offseason. Like I want to do something. I want to like get back into looking at teams and having takes and having things to talk about. So yeah, just biding my time pretty much. That's what I've got going. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. We will be back next week for another episode. Thank you guys again for supporting the show. Please join the Discord community. We're always there playing games. I don't know how much. I gotta be on the double-digit hours of Yiska and I just sitting in chat, playing Escape from Tarkov, hanging out, chatting shit, maiming, all kinds of stuff. So please join the community, support the show, like and subscribe, download it on iTunes if you can't support elsewhere, and we will see you guys in the next one. Adios.
Peace.